Righto, money miners, Ahmed's back. Lithium rare earths.
Mate, pumped. Very pumped.
Jesus Christ.
Got a lot out of this. In fact, we recorded it last week and we got so interested in rare earths afterwards that we teed up a follow-up with another geo. So that's going to come out. I don't know if it'll come out tomorrow or next week, depending how lazy we are on Friday.
I think it'll be Friday. So we're going rare earths Thursday, rare earths Friday. So you'd say it's frequent earths. Well, that's how it's going. So let's just rip it.
Do it.
Righto, money miners, backed by popular demand, our resident geological and exploration and spivvy stock specialist, Ahmad. Welcome, mate. YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, everyone demanded your return. Thank you for doing the return, mate.
No problems. I'll say what I said last time, and I'll continue this. You're only as good as your last performance. So when I tank, that'll be the time. That'll be my last
Don't
performance.
say that because we've had some absolute dusters ourselves some days. We rock up and we come back and we do it all over again.
Mate, rinse and repeat. Mate, what is going on? So, ladies and gentlemen, agenda. Lithium and rare earths, am I right?
That is the agenda, Matty. Lithium and rare earths, we're going all over the world, different styles, different projects. We slung out the question to the money miners and they gave us companies, commodities, projects they want to talk about, and that's what we're going to deliver. I mean, do you want to start with?
It's surprising that they are the two things.
Yeah, because of the relative
today.
vogue. Yeah, but if you think of what's captured the attention of the Aussie retail punter, I think lithium's still a bit of an overhang. If we were doing this podcast in Canada, they'd be in your court uranium all the way.
Yeah, I think, but it's like, I wonder how much of the lithium stuff is like, I still hold
Yes, totally, yeah. And then rare earths
to get back
are like,
up.
even though like commodity prices in the doldrums, think of there's the real success that's happened in the Brazilian rare earth sort of, retail part of the market in recent history, and it's captured people's attention.
Mate, Ahmed, give the punters some validation on whether their stocks are going to return to what they bought them for. Right, later, JD.
Well, where do we want to start, Ahmed? Rare earths or lithium?
Let's do lithium, I guess. Let's
Okay.
start with that because we got enough comments about that.
With like the exploration context of lithium has evolved a lot as the commodities obviously become a lot more popular and in demand. But when you think of like the fundamentals geologically to a generalist that you should kind of be across, what should someone like me who knows very little about geology kind of just be looking out for or be aware of when it comes to sort of making sense of the geology when it comes to lithium?
Yeah, so I think that's a good point to start on in that lithium, even from a technical understanding of what the deposit should look like and the mine should look like, is very young. Like we don't have. One of the things I tell people is that we still have very little idea on what a good lithium mine and not so good lithium mine actually looks like. Like what type of deposit or resource or things do you need for it to become a lithium mine? And that's like, if you look at the Australian examples, a lot of the things like Green Bushes, like Pilgangora, they were tin and tantalum mines, and then they became kind of lithium mines on the back of it. So, so they were mined obviously as a tin thing and a tantalum thing for a while.
Any
and then
tin still there?
Yeah, there's still often these pegmatites have
There's a tantalum circuit at Greenbushes, yeah.
Yeah. So they often these pegmatites are you'll often see this thing called LCT. So it's like lithium, cesium, and tantalum. That's kind of the pegmatite. So some people have mined them for cesium, which is not a lot of uses for it. Tantalum, there's slightly more. And obviously tin, tin is a very kind of, up and down commodity. Sometimes it really catches. Yeah, that's right.
It's very
Easy, Ahmed, easy.
I'm
to
talking
the
about
right.
lithium here.
It's always up.
Don't worry about Metals X. Maybe Green Bushes is the next tin mine.
That's right.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
So
anyway.
we've heard from Mr. Joe Lowry that we should view lithium as a specialty chemical. What's your sort of view on specialty chemical, bulk, niche metal? How do you think about lithium in that sort of regard?
Good question. I think, in reality, if the projections of how much lithium we're really going to use are true, then I think it would have to become a bulk commodity to some degree. It'll have to have the economics of a bulk commodity. If the use cases of lithium in the market space constrained down to some high end uses and the things that we're going to use it for, then I think it will probably end up becoming a specialty kind of product. So I think that market space is still trying to figure out how that's going to play itself. And that's largely because, like when you produce lithium, you can produce lithium in a lot of different ways. Like, if it comes from spodumene, you can just probably produce just like a simple Li2O kind of concentrate. Like if it's a different type of lithium mineral, then you can produce it in a different kind of type of concentrate. You can produce a spodumene concentrate, so you don't do any kind of concentrating really in that sense. You're just kind of sending the mineral. So I think all of that stuff is still trying to be worked out in the market space and how is it actually going to be absorbed in that sense. And and sometimes people question why that is, but you also have to think about certain elements that we use. We've used them since antiquity, right? Like, we have significant use cases. We know exactly how they should be. The market understands, the refineries understand. So we're still trying to, I think, work that stuff out in lithium. But my general sense is that, if you're going to use lithium the way that we say we're going to use it, like we're almost washing our face with it on everything, then I think it will have to go down the path of almost becoming a bulk commodity to some degree.
And how do you think about metallurgy? That's, downstream from the mine, essentially, there has been a lot of problems in Australia, hydroxide, these sorts of things. How do you think about that more broadly when you're stacking up the merits of projects?
I think, I think as a general rule, the less complexity you have in a mine, the better. The more, and it's kind of different, right? Geologically speaking, the more complexity you have, the more likely the chance you're going to have a big deposit. In a mining sense, the less complexity you have, the more chance you're actually going to have a profitable mine. Right? So I think as soon as you start seeing, like there's some lithium projects where the lithium is hosted in a number of different mineral species, and people often talk about that as a positive. And, like I would question that would be a challenging thing from a mining aspect. Like how do you actually separate those minerals out? And, like what type of recoveries are you going to get? All of those type of things. So as a general rule, the less complexity you have in your ore body, the easier it is to actually mine and make it an economic mine in that sense.
That sort of makes sense. So with the table kind of set there, one of the big questions we had is Quebec lithium, Canadian lithium. Why don't we start there? There's a bunch of ASX listed projects that are, they're sitting over there. A lot of them came here because of our capital markets, despite the project being over there. But James Bay is also a sort of region that comes to mind. If you want to start there, let's tackle Canadian lithium.
Yeah, so I think, like we obviously had a lithium rush in Australia, where people went. And as I mentioned, that a lot of that initial wave was people targeting, existing tin tantalum mines. In James Bay, I think it worked a little bit differently in the sense that, so James Bay is obviously in Quebec, and one of the major, I guess, proponents of rural development in Quebec is Quebec Hydro, which is kind of the energy producer. And so if you look at James Bay, James Bay is for people that know in Australia, that's their snowy hydro kind of area. That's where a lot of hydro gets produced. And Quebec being Quebec sells none of that to the rest of Canada, and they sell it all to the eastern states of the United States. So like New York, Vermont, all of these places get a lot of their energy from Quebec. And so why Quebec Hydro is important is that a lot of the infrastructure that was initially set up in James Bay was actually set up by Quebec Hydro. And one of the things that I kind of noticed, and I have to give a shout out to a colleague of mine named Jamil Sader, who I affectionately call Darth Sader. And he kind of highlighted this, that if you look at a lot of the development of projects in James Bay, they're all really basically following the existing roads that are in that area right now. And then all of those roads and that infrastructure is built thanks to Quebec Hydro. And so I think James Bay became an area where a lot of people focused or went, is because A, it was easy to access because all of that existing infrastructure existed. B, the pegmatites form are geological or topographic features in the area. They form the top of hills. They're easy to see. There's not a lot of forest in that part of Quebec. So you can see all these white rocks sticking out all over the place.
It's all been, all the is it all the glacier water's just weathered, taking all the weathering away, hey?
That's
Or
right.
just
Yeah.
fucking
So like,
sticking out?
in Canada, we don't have the problem in Canada that you have in Australia. Like there is none of this like couple of 100 meters of dirt sitting on top because in Canada the glaciers have scraped all of this shit away for geologically speaking, anyways. So you don't have any of those problems. And so and the glaciers also not like sandpaper a lot of these hills nicely, so you can kind of like they're all nice and smooth. And
Got to make something easy over there.
yeah, that's right.
Everything else is fucking hard.
Yeah, that's all right. So a lot of companies went to James Bay because like it was easy to spot pegmatites. There's a couple of existing gold mines which have geologically quite well figured out the relationship between gold mineralization and intrusions and pegmatites. It was known that they had all lithium kind of existing in those pegmatites. So long story short, the reason why James Bay kind of highlighted as an area is, it's Quebec. It's quite a friendly jurisdiction to work in. There's infrastructure there, and geologically, people knew where there were pegmatites already. So, question of it was really just to go and drill a lot of these things to see what the grade of the lithium was going to be in them. And then that's why I think companies kind of went there. It was kind of like the easiest kill you could have if you really wanted to go find pegmatites in Canada.
There were multiple kind of exploration success stories of the last lithium boom, and while the shareholders would be on a relative basis upset at the moment given the cycle, the ones that kind of have I guess the largest kind of base of shareholders that might have had the most prosperity in the exploration domain would be Patriot and Winsome, and both have different merits, fierce shareholders on both sides.
Yep.
So whatever you say now, I'm sure someone's going to get offended in some way, shape, or form. But that's
without fail.
It comes part and parcel with it all. When you kind of look at the two companies, two resources, two propositions, what are your initial impressions?
I mean, I think like Patriot, I think did a really good job because they were the first company that really went out there and found significant amount of pegmatite and had decent grade. So the Corvette or Corvée, depending if you're French or English, like that was really the one where, like that was the first major kind of drilling campaign really in that part of the world, and it returned significant results. Like, you were returning, like 100 or more than 100 meter kind of intersections of pegmatites at, 1 to 1.5% lithium. And that's also a general rule. Like, lithium is sometimes a little bit hard to understand. Like, what does 100 meters at 1% lithium mean? So as a general rule, if you get somewhere between 125 to 150 meter intersection at 1% lithium, that's the equivalent of getting, say, 100 meters at 1 gram per ton gold, around that kind of level. So they were the first company that went out and had several of these intersections. They put a resource together, and I think that reflected in their share price early. You look at what Corvée is, it's not very far away from infrastructure. It's about, like it would be the first, you pull over on the side of the road and you could probably go explore, and that's what they did. And then they found it. And I'm not completely au fait with the history of the project, but I think the pegmatites were known in that part of the world, and Patriot picked up that project from someone else, because they actually went in that area exploring for gold. Like that's what they were doing, and then this kind of happened to fall in their lap when the lithium boom kind of took off. So it's inevitable that they all get compared to Patriot in that sense. But there's one, like, in the show notes, I have this kind of lithium, like kind of graph that I've put up. And I actually think, this is one of the graphs that explains that dichotomy between lithium projects really, really nicely. In that, and when you put this up on as part of the video, you'll see
should be in there, brother.
that there'll be a few mines that'll be on the right hand side of the graph. So in essence, the graph is just the size of the deposit on the bottom and then the grade on the left hand side. And so you can see that you have Monono, Greenbushes, and Pilgangora on the right hand side.
They've had to pull Monono in as well. You can see down the bottom on the scale.
That's right, because it's like orders of magnitude bigger than that, or one order of magnitude probably bigger than that. And so so those are all existing mines, and they're all several 100 million tons resource. At roughly the same grade. So that's an interesting thing, right? So the grade of these deposits tends to be very, like between 1 and kind of 1.5, 1.6. But the size of them differs. And example, if you look at IOCG deposits, they often have the same kind of distribution, that the grade of IOCG deposits tends to be very similar, but the size of them tends to be quite variable, right? Like
That's really interesting, right? Because it's like it makes the special mine so much more special when they're in a league of their own. And in this case, I guess it's the scale allows cost advantages when mining it.
And we haven't even got Azure on there yet. They haven't even got a mineral resource yet.
Exploration target.
Coming.
That's
coming.
right.
1 to 240,
right.
something like that.
So, so there's like some commodities where you can kind of see that, like maybe the economics of whether a project becomes a mine or not is dependent on size. And so, so in this case, it might be size that, like if you can get it to be a couple of 100 million ton resource, irrespective of the grade, you're probably going to get an economic kind of mine out of it.
Yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, to a lot of the North American ones have got bigger spodumene crystals, which are going to be, they're more not like a fine-grained Liontown or possibly Andover. There's a lot bigger over there, more amenable to possibly DMS only.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so they so a lot of this like spodumene concentrate production, like for them, once they crush up the rock, they can just kind of send it out, like you said, as a DSO product.
Oh no, but like the processing, they don't have to, not a DSO, but like they won't have to put flotation in.
No,
maybe.
that's right. Yeah.
Oh, mate, if they do bloody need float over there, good water apparently. Fresh as a daisy.
You can just drink it.
Fucking
Just like
no salt.
Yeah.
You'd give it to your grandmother. Like, they bloody love it. Yeah, true story.
I believe you. It looks fresh. It's beautiful scenery.
Fresh as bloody Nathan Stoidis' little side gig would be good for fuck all over there. No membrane filters needed.
Yeah,
that's right.
But as a result, there's like the permitting timelines in Canada are so much more elongated than what we might be accustomed to in Western Australia, a more established kind of
the
mining province,
Cree, getting the Cree on side, like
that's
just the community. Yeah, because as you look at it, it's just as you say, JD, stunning,
mate.
Stunning.
But this is where
a hole in stunning it ain't easy sometimes.
Doesn't look so stunning anymore.
Boys, as you know, I'm not short of creating new potential insurance derivatives for our industry, but do you reckon CRE Insurance could offer permitting insurance? Now, I reckon there's a market for it.
So
America.
You want to be insured against the potential that the
Permitting takes fucking 10 years.
The knob jobs at the bloody permitting place don't give you a permit.
Yeah, or they just don't look at the permit for 5 years or...
If it's doable, Matty, I think I know one mob that could do it.
I think, considering CRE's pretty much taken over African mining insurance and, they're getting into Australia is going to be a piece of piss with their rap sheet, but possibly North American permitting insurance. Mate, you imagine if a bit of the next-gen money was allocated towards permitting insurance instead of
I kind of feel like what you're describing.
F1 teams.
It's almost like what you're describing is international arbitration.
Yeah. Is that it?
I think,
It's also a bit of a turnkey solution.
It is a turnkey.
So I was speaking with the team last night, actually. Essentially what they said is there is not a risk out there that they can't look after. Look after. Yeah.
Yeah, just look after.
They will look after. You've got a risk, go speak with the team at CRE Insurance and they will just, you speak straight with the head honchos there and they'll just look after you.
There you go. Anything mining insurance, whether the insurance exists or not, CRE Insurance is the only mining insurance brand you need to know. Permitting insurance. Sounds good.
Go CRE.
Go Australia.
But this is where I think this part of Quebec, I think, matters, is that, like Quebec, because, like you've already had infrastructure development here, like people are accustomed to, like there's nearly been probably 50, 60 years of infrastructure development, largely from Quebec Hydro. There's also mines here, there's the Eleanor mine, which is Newmont, I think. Like that's existing. There's a number of gold. So,
Is even the diamond mine there, which Windsor wants to incorporate in there.
Yeah, that's right. Like which is kind of closed up now. But so there's a bit of history here. So this is probably not the worst part of Canada to develop things in.
So that Quebec Hydro, it says here it's got 37.2 gigawatts of power capacity.
Yeah.
It's fucking huge. It's like 37 nuclear reactors.
Maddie's just everything's energy.
Gigawatts.
I know.
I might have been
Yeah.
bloody. I think I did an
Maddie's
episode
pivoting
last
into
week.
energy
I think I
production.
said snowy hydro wouldn't have pumped out as much as nuclear, but I'm probably wrong there. But she'd be right. I'll sort that out when I get to Canberra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway, continue.
so I think I guess the major thing is like, you look at like Corvette, you look at James Bay, like a number of these other ones that sit here, like Wabushi, like all of they're all kind of like that 75 to 100 million ton, like size, and the grade is between 1.2, 1.3, 1.5, something like that.
So it's kind of interesting to me that there were a couple that became mines in that after that first, sort of during that first lithium price wave, sort of 17, 18 really into 19, and they haven't proved to be very profitable mines in quite a bit of hardship. And often the projects that come to be mined first are the best assets. They're just found because they're closer to surface or yada, yada, yada. But that doesn't actually seem to be the case here. It does seem like some of these later deposits are better than the ones that became mines before them.
Yeah, that's true, I think, in that. And I think that's a function of, I guess, a fast-moving market, right? That, like now, like I said, the how the market receives the product is still maturing. So on that side, until the market figures that out, I guess the more the market figures that out, the more you are able to create a better product that fits the market. Hence, you're going to be more economic. So I don't doubt that. Like this part of Quebec, I think we'll end up seeing quite a bit of lithium development, like mine development, if it goes down that path. And that's just because like lithium mining, like especially if you're having to crush, like lithium, like pegmatites tend to be really hard. So so the main cost of them is really like the crushing of the rock. Like here, you got tons of cheap electricity that's available around the corner. It's also green, so it also passes that kind of aspect. So I think that like the economics of them will be like heavily subsidized by what the state has already kind of done or the province has already done in that part of the world.
Where's Arcadium's James Bay project up to? Is that still being under development, or I've bloody lost track of that one?
Somewhere in there.
I think it's approved. Yeah, so that's Arcadium is now Alchem.
Allchem,
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, and I think that spent 10 years in its approvals process or thereabouts. It's approved. I listened to it.
But not being developed yet, is it?
I don't know, mate.
I'm not sure if they pushed the button, but I think they're along the path somewhere to go about it.
And that's, as you said, bloody decade worth of
But there's also
trying to get the fucking thing going.
Like Wabushi, which is in Namaska Lithium, which is a private company, but the province of Quebec has some involvement in it, which is something they often do, is that they put money into projects and then that assists them going through the permitting cycle and things like that, and then the province then takes their money out at some point. So those two will probably get developed, like along the way, and then it'll just become a question of how like Patriot and Winsome and these guys, how they fit into that ecosystem of assets that are getting developed.
That Namaska one was the mine that had gone bankrupt,
correct?
Right?
That's right.
Scooped up,
Yeah.
So
and now it's privately held, I think. Now.
Yeah. And what do you think's going to be like? Do you think lithium's going to have a bit more pain before there's a bit of a catalyst for someone like a Patriot, like someone to actually try and buy them? Or do you think there's going to have to be a bit more confidence in a lithium rebound? Like, when do you think it's actually the ball's going to get rolling?
I think like currently the market, I think, suffers from just a lack of confidence, right? Like people don't know. I mean, if you follow like some projections of lithium, right? Like, we're going to need 10 times the number of lithium mines we have. Other people seem to think that we're not going to have that, like that demand. So I think that has to kind of shore up because right now, like, if you're Winsome, the only way you're gonna raise the money to build a mine is if you know that your product is gonna displace something else in the marketplace. So until that happens, you're gonna wait around.
Yeah,
and because it's it's I don't know if you call it an immature market or whatnot, but there's also the uncertainty about the other types of extraction of lithium and where in the cost curve they'll fit if they come to market and what timeline. So you take like a big capital bet on an acquisition, and some companies will do that, but there's always the overhang of the other mechanisms of extraction.
That's right. Yeah. And there's also things
advances.
like, like Quebec's talking about building a lithium processing kind of center, like focusing it. They have quite a number of deposits, which are not small, they're not piddly small things, but they're not big either. But so if you can make it a more of a hub and spoke kind of model where, the government processes it, but you just the miner and I provide the product, and then the government, it makes sense, right? Like you're an energy provider, then you can also become an energy storage, and maybe that's the avenue that they want to go down. And if that happens, then it fundamentally changes the economics of all of these deposits, so that can happen as well, that government intervention.
Especially if they can get some Inflation Reduction Act subsidies, on the OPEX, on the CAPEX and these sorts of things to help them in the earlier years.
That's right.
Through. So to swing the conversation a bit closer to home, another one we've been asked about is Wildcat, Tabba Tabba. Again, like Azure, no resource yet, but what do you make of the deposit, how it's coming together, the exploration technique and how they've gone about discovering it and so on?
I guess from an exploration technique point of view, they're probably, it's a pretty simple story in that, people had known about these pegmatites because, again, they had a tin and tantalum kind of association with them. All credit to Wildcat that they went into the deal. I'm not sure exactly how much they paid, but it was like somewhere between 5 to 10 million, some order of that amount of money that they paid. And they've got this ground. The pegmatites were mapped. They knew they were sitting there. And now the question for Wildcat really is how can they tie all of them together into a resource, and what does that resource look like? And I think that's probably true for a lot of lithium projects. We're talking about James Bay. James Bay, I think, has gone through that evolution where a lot of projects have gone into resource, and now you know the resource. Now you can worry about the economics for those resource. Whereas Azure and Wildcat still sit at the stage now where they're just doing that amount of resource drilling to figure out, well, what does our resource actually look like? And then we can worry about the economics on the other side.
It was remarkable that, what did they raise? 100, I think it was 100 million at the time, and they still had a bit.
I think it was at 70 or 80 cents.
Yeah, something like
raised
that.
it at a good time. And
this is once lithium had already started peeling off.
It was the last, I remember it specifically, it was like one of the last raises before
they stopped raising.
Lithium really declined, and it was,
And now they're sitting pretty with $80+ in the bank.
Yeah.
And they can continue to...
We could find a snippet of when I said this is the
I
end
remember
of
that.
WA Lithium.
It was when Wildcat put out drill results.
They put out some drill results and they
didn't go
bounce.
up. And you said, you were like, Matty's like, this is the top. And you're right.
We can.
I like to keep it simple, boys.
But that could be enough to see them through to better days, right?
Oh, shit, yeah.
It's a phenomenal amount of money.
Yeah, and I think they have plans. I mean, they're going to do a pretty big drilling program. So they
100 kilometres, I think.
Yeah, so they are going to chew
shit
into
out
it
of
quite a bit.
Yeah.
But
what do you, because MinRes on they're 20, I think they're 19.9, aren't they? Yeah, they're 19.9 of Wildcat.
I can't remember. They're definitely 15 at
15,
least.
yeah.
15 to
so
20.
but I'm just interested to see what your thoughts are. What do you think they're going to, do you think they might wait for a bit more pain and act on that? But
MinRes,
because that's like, you think of all the standout ones in Australia at the moment that are on the table is, Andover and Wildcat are bloody, you would say the top two of to be developed. Like anything else spring to mind? Not really of scale and
just
thickness.
just brownfield sort of expansion would be the
like actual greenfield.
But yeah, new projects that could get developed lithium wise, I think they would probably be like ahead of most other projects right now.
Yeah. So
when you think MinRes, it's like they've got one of their 3 trains turned off at Wodgina. Like, I don't think they're gonna. I think they've copped so much heat for the degen sort of FOMOing into lithium in the boom, and that and where's the balance sheet capacity to enable it as well?
Yeah, and I suppose they're just it's one of it's a lever to pull when they need to pull it.
Maybe they do a scrip offer just to get the cash and bolster their balance sheet, mate.
Yeah, true.
Take a free advisor fee there from Travis Ricciardo.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of maybe the challenges as well is that when Wildcat would have raised the money and things it would have been really hard take these guys out at that time, just because of what their capitalization was at that point. Now that it's kind of come down, now it's really, if you're MinRes, it's really what do you think the outlook would be for lithium in your business, and do you take the punt now because you could probably buy them for half the price you could a couple of years ago? So,
and you think of like, say they got $80 million and they drill it out, and they don't really, the story's not going to really change. Like, we sort of know what's there, and it's probably going to get proved up and infilled. And if Tabba Tabba proves up, do you think they're going to have enough water? Have we got any insight on water there? It's going to be a big operation, I reckon. Whoa. Boys, you know where I'm going. Do they need GetWet bladders eventually?
Here's the thing. I know under the Pilbara there is a metric shit ton of water, Matty.
Yeah.
So you want that stored up, just like a tap above. And I know GetWet, they will look after it. They'll come out, they'll install it, they'll do everything for you. They'll have it sorted.
It's not just a bladder solution, is it, JD? Because they can set up the bores and pump it out into the bladder, or just directly into into the mill, or whatever the fuck you want.
Mate, we haven't even mentioned the guarantees, the warranties. There is nothing to worry about.
Do you know they've got a 10-year warranty?
That's amazing.
And a 20-year life. So based on, Tabba Tabba, 10 million tonne, 200 million tonne resource, like probably won't be 10 million tonne a year, but fuck. That's one GetWet bladder.
The bladder will last longer than the mine.
Yeah. And
phenomenal.
Do you
That's just a guarantee. It probably goes longer than that.
Have you ever seen a hard side, like the old school hard sided tanks get a puncher in them? Pretty much go off like a fucking bomb, like just water pissing everywhere.
It's like a goon bag.
Not a GetWet bladder, mate. If you get a hole in it, you just chuck a patch on it, fixed in minutes. Doesn't rupture, doesn't anything like that. It's just a little leak.
Phenomenal.
Put a patch, fix. They have them in fucking blast zones.
But mate,
you could get a bit of space rock fall on it, and you'd have it fixed in 2 minutes.
Yeah, this is worst case scenario, by the way, man. I saw you go at it with a jumbo and you couldn't fucking put a hole in it. They're fucking good.
I couldn't bore a hole underground, let alone in a GetWet bladder. But mate, if there's any misconceptions out there with a GetWet bladder's bloody integrity, get rid of them, because holy snap and duck shit, they're solid as anything, and nothing that a bloody patch can't fix. So, mate, have you ever seen anyone patch a hard-sided tank? No is the answer, by the way. No, and you never will.
You can't.
Never will.
Structural advantages to a fucking bladder.
Call Matty and GetWet.
Just
go Australia.
But it's not exactly clear to me why, if all these things are outcropping, which I understand is pretty common in the area, at least the known bits are fairly common, why all these weren't snapped up in 2018?
Yeah, that's a good question. For Tabba Tabba, I think it was held by a tantalum producer, private tantalum
That makes
producer.
sense, but Azure as well.
Scam.
And
Yeah, so Azure is a good question.
that was a nickel. That was going to be the next big nickel thing.
yeah, well, that had a phenomenal run in 2020.
They needed
I wanna say.
heritage to be allowed to drill there, which
Yeah.
didn't
that
which,
makes sense.
which I think is something that is going to determine what type of mine it is.
Yeah.
Whether it's an underground or an open pit,
pit.
I would assume. Because
okay.
pegmatites they're not a sacred site to the traditional owners, but it's
The outcropping areas are, as far as I understand,
outcropping,
special
it's-
places.
yeah. So
Yeah.
tough to leave them there in an open pit.
I think you're onto something, Matty.
Unless you hold it with a crane or something. But it doesn't work like that.
No, that's high. So so I think they, so most of these reasons were held back for either an ownership or a land access reason, I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, a fair amount of them were. I mean, like like in James Bay, you can map these things from a satellite photo, right? Like, they're that level. So so they were known well and truly for a while.
And red flags in lithium news. I remember when we started the podcast, it was like every day there was some rock chip sample pump and dump going on. Like, someone spruiking big lithium grades, but it was petalite. All of this stuff was going on, right? What are the red flags to look out for the punters, dabbling in lithium stocks?
Definitely don't just do it on rock chips. That'll be the one. I mean, that's just like I say that half in jest, but I genuinely say that pegmatites are they're not hard hard to find, right? The problem is not finding a pegmatite. The problem is finding a lithium mine, and they're two fundamentally different problems. Like I can only talk about my experience, right? Like, when I went to Greenbushes and you go and look at the pit floor, like you see the proportion of the pit floor that is actually pegmatites, you understand why that's a lithium mine and other places aren't. Like there's a certain concentration of pegmatites that you need for it to become a viable lithium mine, economic lithium mine, that I'm not sure if picking up, like rock chips from one pegmatite, no matter how continuous and how wide it is, that's not really going to make a lithium mine. So, and to your comment, I think there was a lot of that, right? Because people were just looking at the grade number, but maybe they weren't understanding the context of, it's one pegmatite, it anastomoses, and it's quite wavy in the geological kind of map. So, I'm not sure that's going to make it for you in that sense.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit more difficult in Australia, isn't it? Especially down in the Goldfields region where you've got that top weathered zone where a lot of the lithium has been dissolved. So you've got to actually, get through it to see if there's actually got the concentration below it. But as in contrast to Canada, I think it sounds a bit easier to determine if it's there. Is that the same principle up north in the Pilbara, like where Tabba and all that are?
Yeah, so in the Pilbara you get it's a lot better exposure than it is in, say, the Goldfields. And that's just because
all wind and shit up there just fucking destroyed it over the years.
That's right. It's just fundamentally, a lot of it also has to do with for example, in Canada, the reason why pegmatites form these ridges is because the surrounding rock to the pegmatites is actually quite friable. It breaks apart quite easily. So so they preferentially stay together, and the stuff around them falls apart. And so in the Pilbara, it's a little bit like that as well, in that there's a lot of weathering, but it's just that the pegmatites preferentially weather slower than the stuff that's surrounding them, which goes faster, so they become more prominent kind of features to see.
And what about the sort of the width of the intercepts? I see some coming out and they're 15 meters versus some of the 100 plus 125 that we talk about, especially when you think about Liontown and how they speak about how they're keeping that thick border because they don't want any dilution with the outer, they want a good margin
keep
of
the
safety.
iron out of it.
Exactly. And then you see things like Mana, their global lithium project, and Delta Lithium today, and you're talking about 15-meter wide things, and the sort of dikes stacked on top of each other. But thinking downstream to the processing, you just think, oh, that could be pretty hard. You think like that as well?
Yeah. So I mean, I think one of the when the first wave of kind of lithium results came out, these kind of whatever 75, 100, 125 meter intersections, I often went and checked those intersections afterwards when they had more drilling in that area. And often what you found is that, a lot of them were either, what we call stacked, they were several intrusions, and you would stack them together into one, and they're not necessarily reporting the internal kind of dilution.
Sort of smear them across.
So maybe, over 100 meters you hit pegmatites, but maybe they were all 5-10 meter thick, and in between there was a lot of other stuff.
I think the big thing that's changed since we were probably covering it shitloads is the ore sorting technology, which is getting employed at Pilgangoora now, because I think from my knowledge, Pilgangoora has got a metric fuck ton of material sitting there that is highly contaminated with waste that they haven't processed. So
that's right. And I mean, if you think of the perfect application of ore sorting, this would probably be it, right? A highly reflective white rock compared to a rock that's not very reflective and usually dark or some. That's about as big a contrast as you can get. So if you can't make that shit work here, I'm not sure you can make it work anywhere.
No. It sounds like, would you say that the Australian lithium development pipeline is probably pretty established now with what we have? Because look how long Liontown's, the effort and time that, even though it's how long they've been developing and constructing Kathleen Valley for, and we're still yet to, as you said, see the bloody lie detector come out when they actually start going. So there's a lot to go through there. And you've got Wildcat and Andover sort of sitting there, but everything else below that is just really small, like small scale. So you're like, you can't see much bloody happening there. Like Mount Ida's been around, that's been sort of proven up, ready for ages, but it's only 14 million ton, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I guess that's the point I make about the market. Like, you really need the market to grow to a point where something beyond, Taba or Andover can really come into the pipeline. So, like what if, or in that graph, that I have, what if a 50 million ton project can actually supply the lithium into the market and still be viable? So, so if you're the best, 50 million ton lithium resource and you can make that economic, then there's a place in the marketplace for you. Like right now, I'm not sure there is, because Greenbushes could probably change their mine plan and fill that void right now. The market hasn't grown enough to that point now, anyways.
Man, look at Pilgangora chucking an extra 320,000 ton on to get to P1000.
Yeah.
So it's, and to make a 320,000 ton spot operation, that's a pretty friggin' big mine. Well, it's half of Kathleen Valley.
That's
or a bit over half. So it's not an easy feat.
No, that's hard.
I think they'll be waiting to see how this Liontown ramp. Do you reckon that Liontown ramp up's a bit of a litmus test?
I think
for these other
everyone
ones?
would be watching.
Yeah.
All right, all this lithium talk's making me a bit sad, guys. Let's talk about rare earths.
Is that going to cheer you up, JD?
It might cheer some of the listeners up because they think, they're coming in at the bottom. There's been a lot of cheer about Brazilian rare earths, both the company and rare earths in Brazil.
Yep.
The company just raised 65, got upscaled to 80, I think. So they've raised a fair bit. So set the table for us. How do you think about rare earths, the different types of projects we see, the different types of rare earths and whatnot, and let's get into it.
Sure. So I think, like I said, that, it took us a while, like even technically or even economically to understand lithium. I think it's probably going to take us longer to understand, rare earths, particularly technically, I think. And I say this, with all honesty in the sense that it took me a while to understand rare earths as well, because it's not geologically one of the easiest things to understand.
If it took you a while, we're all buggered.
Yeah, maybe not, right? Like that's kind of the idea. And I think, so rare earths, market wise, I think they're fundamentally different in how they kind of operate. And that's largely because of the influence that the Chinese have on it. There's some, rare earths that basically China is the primary producer and is the primary consumer, nearly 100% of producer and consumer in some rare earths. So that stuff just doesn't leave China in that sense at all. And so, so I think understanding rare earths, one of the reasons I think Brazil is really kind of caught kind of the attention is that probably the only tier one or one of the largest ionic clay rare earth deposits is being developed in Brazil, which is Serra Verde.
Yeah, and stand out, for the grades and the acid consumption required for it compared to the the ionic clays down in Esperance. It's just the Meteoric was that first standout. Now you obviously got VMM and Brazil BRE, is that?
Yeah, Brazil
Ionic
rare
as well.
They've got both, I believe.
Yeah. And so that's, I think, one of the things to understand in rare earths is that there's actually probably 3 different types of rare earth sources. Yeah. So so in layman's terms, you can either get rare earths out of the original rock. So so that's hard rock rare earths in that sense. There's another one that you can get out of it, which is essentially sands, so they're called monazite sands usually. And so
which is what Arafura is. I think that's a monazite.
Oh, is it? Okay, I don't know.
Pretty sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so so the here we go. You can do a fact check while I.
So
while I keep talking.
monazite's more like, so I understand it's like one of the waste streams of the mineral sands, and then that's why Luke is going to have then have a refinery because they can.
That's right. Yeah. So Aluka does heavy mineral sands, so ilmenite and things like that. One of the major byproducts of that is monazite that comes out of it.
Yeah.
And so, like right now, they've probably been throwing that stuff away, and they could probably process it. In certain assets.
Nolan's is
Gotcha.
it's a apatite, monazite, and allanite.
There you go.
There you go.
Why like when I think of like rare earths, there's all of these rare earths. Barely any of them are really like saleable. You've got neodymium, praseodymium. Those have the largest market, but they're not the most the ones with the highest price. That's the DYTB.
Terbium, dysprosium, and terbium.
Yeah, but the market size is pretty fucking small. So you need to have, and the rest cerium, whatever, maybe I don't know, but just ignore the rest in terms of like your basket. But like whenever you see rare earth resources, there's just so much there, and there's often so much. Like obviously all of the rare earths are listed, but there's also uranium, thorium. Like it seems that they're often mineralized with these nasties at the same time too.
Yeah, and I think this is something that you like when you're looking at these projects, you can kind of pick them up. Like the often used term in the industry is the TREO, total rare earth oxide. Which is a complete bullshit term, right? Because half of the rare earths are not economic anyways. And so so when you look at that, you should always go look at what they've shoehorned into that number, because people just inflate it to make it look as good as possible.
And what was it? Was it Hastings? I think their big differentiator was their percent NdPr of the trio. I think that's
right. Yeah. So they use a thing called MREO, I think it's like mineable rare earth oxide,
mixed
something like that.
Yeah,
some like measure. And so the higher the ratio of MREO to TREO, like MRE is the stuff that you can actually make money out of. Yeah. The rest of it is just junk.
There's always a good way you can spin it at a conference.
Yeah,
on the graph.
Got to slice the data some way to make you number one on the comps chart. That's right. Of that metric.
And if you're not, you make up a metric that you are number one at.
Totally. Yeah.
That's right. And so to your question about like uranium and thorium, so like ideally uranium is often associated with these things, and sometimes you don't want it to be, because there's some rare earth mines that have been stopped because of the fact that they have uranium attached to them. Like Kavanafeld is one in Greenland, which is going through a problem right now because it has quite a lot of uranium, and the country doesn't want. You can't mine above a certain threshold of uranium, so that project's stuck. And thorium is something you probably don't want in your project at all, because like there's no market for thorium really, and to process it out usually is a cost, and you often can't leave it in tailings to a certain degree either. So you have to end up doing something with it. So the higher the thorium that sits in these things, the more likely you're not going to be on the economic curve in that sense either. But to your point that the rare earth kind of elements of interest, there's what called the light rare earths, which is neodymium and praseodymium. Those are the two, and then the heavy ones.
That's so wrong for so long.
Neodymium.
I've been saying praseodymium, not praseodymium.
And so you can just see like
I know what you meant.
And you can just say like NdPr, those are the lights.
That is my go-to.
And like DYTB are the heavy ones.
Yes, that is. I can do that.
And I think that's to be honest, most people will go down that path as well. And so the other thing to know is that actually the world has lots of light rare earth elements. Like they. Most rare earth, they're not very rare in that sense, in the rare earth kind of bucket.
Rarely mined.
That's right. Yeah. And so it's more the heavies that you really need, and they tend to be very, very rare. And the only place that really produces them is China. The stuff that comes out of China, that really produces that. So to what you want to look for in a project, you don't want to look for a lot of uranium or thorium if you can help it. Ideally, it depends how you want to look at it. If it ends up being hard rock, then it's got to be at least a couple of percent TREO. If it's not a couple of percent, then you're not going to make money on 1,000 ppm or something like that.
Yeah, I think because it's like you look at Mount Weld. I think it's about 4 and a bit percent.
Yeah,
I think
it goes up to like 7 or 8.
Nolan's, the Arafura one is 2.5, and then there's a big gap down to the next ones on the hard rock. Like for the hard rock, clays are obviously in the 1,000. Like I think Meteoric's 2,000 odd ppm, which is a standout. Yeah.
So 2,000 ppm is 0.2%, right?
But it's the there's advantages in processing the
Correct.
ionic clays.
Yeah, like, you need a shovel.
in mining it because it's all free dig.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you just like it's no drill and blast. You just fuck.
But don't you skip
Just get a
a
shovel.
step on the processing as well?
You can.
You
for
can go
some
straight
of
to
them.
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
so
you
like,
don't have to crush it like
Yeah.
or anything. But then it's obviously a shitload of acid and everything to leach it out.
Yeah.
Not too up on it.
I
Don't
mean,
ask me too many questions.
Ahmad, you made the point there that the heavies are produced out of China, and I can't imagine that's purely from the perspective of mineral endowment in China. What is the key advantage? Is it more lax on environmental standards from mining through to processing? Is it IP in the processing part? Why is it that happens predominantly in China?
A little bit of both, but more, I think, the latter, in that they hold the IP to process a lot of rare earths.
Yeah.
Like rare earths can be quite complicated. And China is like light years ahead of everyone else in understanding how you can process these, like what reagents you need, what type of processing temperatures you need, what type of leach you need to set up, all of those type of things. They are way ahead of everyone else.
And now the Department of Defense, I think the Department of Defense or maybe the Department of Energy in the States has given MP Materials and I think Linus as well a couple $100 million to build a heavy rare earth processing facility, I think in Texas. That sound right?
Yeah, Fort Worth, I think.
Yeah. And what's the plans with them? I'm not sure if you have insight in this on getting up to speed with the actual technical know-how of executing that and making sure that the taxpayer money is well spent.
I mean, I think the way they're doing it is, I think they're doing it more specific to, I think, Linus's assets. So they will process the heavies out of the stuff that Linus owns. Like I guess where the Chinese have the dominant edge in the market is because they've been processing so many different ore types for so long, like they can kind of handle the wide selection of ore types that are sent to them. Like for example, there was there's a rare earth mine in California which was funded by Department of Defense, but because of the ore that they produce, they actually had to send it to China to process the concentrate because no other place could actually, process it.
Is this Mountain Pass?
Is it Mountain Pass?
Yeah.
I think it's Mountain Pass. So they,
that's the big sucker.
Yeah. So so there's all these complications in that, like you can produce the concentrate, but in order to actually extract the metal out to put it into the kind of the end use product, the only place that really knows it is kind of a few labs in China.
Yeah.
So I was listening to the MP Materials, one of the bloody Prezzo investor calls the other night, and it was so funny when they talk about Mountain Pass and how it's the greatest thing in the world. Not one mention of Mount Weld or Linus. Like it's just like they.
America is the world.
Gets me thinking. Like they just said Mountain Pass and then China. Not one mention of Mount Weld.
Interesting.
Fascinating.
Very interesting.
Are they up to something?
They already think of themselves as the same company.
Yeah, mate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe Gina wrote the script for him. Who knows?
Yeah. And then on the Ionic Clays, right, this is I think where there's certainly, Aussie punter enthusiasm and also exploration success, right? So like Meteoric was probably first out the gate, kind of capturing the attention of people. VMM sort of popped up, and similarly has a lot of eyes and a lot of people pretty damn interested in what they've got. There might be some complications. It's Brazil. It's beautiful. There's protected areas, all that sort of stuff. But when you think of the Ionic clays, like what are the process? Like what are the advantages of ultimately mining this sort of stuff, which is like the lower percentage? How do you actually get those cost advantages producing them? Yeah,
so they so the Ionic clays give you the benefit in that it's easier to mine. It's relatively easier to mine. You don't have to worry about kind of conventional mining. You don't have to blast anything. You don't have to crush anything. It's all kind of there. But where you pay the price is that it's lower grade, and it's probably as a person that would like to see more environmentally friendly mining, it's probably not the most environmentally friendly way of mining, right?
Because it's like a shitload, but it's thin. So the friggin' surface area of it is
the
huge.
footprint of mining, like would be quite high.
And how it had been mined and processed in China, these style of deposits was horrific.
Pretty
right?
much the same. Yeah. So they,
Didn't they just pour acid over the fucking mountain and just leach it through
I
there?
heard that.
That's the word on the decline.
So they, I mean, like a lot of the ionic clay, I think outside of Brazil and a few other places, most of them are all in places like Myanmar, kind of like the tropics, like in China, Vietnam, places like that. And they, they historically produce them to supply the rare earth market. And now people have looked back and said it's probably not the best way of kind of going and grabbing rare earths.
There's something about just dosing the environment with acid in a place that gets a lot of rainfall doesn't sound too kosher to me.
Acid will sort anything out. Yeah, remember bloody like on Breaking Bad. Damage they cause there. But because is there one clay rare earth thing in operation in Brazil already?
It's just come online now.
Yeah.
And it's called Serra Verde. So I think I think they've developed one, and the other one should come online. I think it's either this year or next year or something like that. So
yeah.
And you made comments earlier about the size of these projects and how on a global sort of basis they're not very significant, right?
No, and I think, one of the things I guess I found about the rare earth market is that, it's not a huge market in that sense. I understand the story of that, we're all using more technology and more kind of devices. And so there will be an uptick in the rare earth market, but I'm not sure you're going to see the market double in size or triple in size anytime soon. It's going to be a steady kind of growth, not opposed to something like copper, where the human consumption of copper over the next decade or so will be fundamentally different than what it was for the last decade in that sense. And so I think, if you have a large rare earth project, you could supply, a significant percentage of the world's rare earth in that sense. So with the number of rare earth projects I see, again, I'm not quite sure that that's really going to fit into the market space of how much rare earths do we actually need in that sense. And the other thing is also, from a use point of view, one of the major uses of these rare earths is that they're used for magnets. And they're used in, cars, largely, or
wind turbines.
Any type of machinery where they can either be used as a generator or as a motor. You can use magnets for both. And so when it becomes a crunch on these elements, people can actually engineer them out. So for example, Volkswagen has created a car where they don't use any rare earth magnets. So if push comes to shove, they could actually create more of those cars, and hence then the demand kind of disappears in that sense.
That's one of the big knocks we'd heard. I think the price right now floats around 50-ish.
40. 43, 44.
A bit below 50.
But I think they said if it gets to 90.
Yeah, 90 was a number where it's gone.
Shout out Dylan Kelly.
Yeah. So you have kind of like a ceiling price or like a ceiling kind of price, or until people go, well, if it's more than that, then I'm not using. And it kind of makes sense, right? If the motor in your car ended up being $50,000, people aren't probably going to be buying too many cars at that point, right? Because the rest of the car still has to be worth $50,000. So there's always a ceiling price to a lot of these components where they'll just get replaced out, and people will just use something else if they need to.
I always remember that the quote from, I think it was Luca Gicavasi, and he was talking about rare earth, and he's like, they're just like pixie dust, the closest thing to pixie dust you can find. They just make everything a little bit better.
So to hone into a couple of the companies a bit more, Brazilian Rare Earths, I'm not sure how deep you've dug on this one, but it is catching a bit of attention. Listed in December, just raised capital again. They've got Whitehaven, of all people, on the register, as well as Gina there as well. So how closely have you looked at the project? Have you got
this is the Brazilian rare earths.
BRE.
I've looked at them in the sense that I think if you're going to look for a project, these guys have a lot going for them, right? They have a huge tenement package. The deposit that they've picked up was previously explored by Rio as a bauxite deposit. And they didn't crack the kind of the limit for them for bauxite. But they never analyzed for rare earths in that sense.
And they've inherited all of the drilling that Rio did from bauxite days.
Yeah, that's how. And so as a project that's going to probably go the quickest from like inception or creation to a resource, I think these guys are probably going to be the quickest thing that's going to get there, because they're going to inherit, since like 50,000-60,000 kilometers of drilling, which they're now assaying for rare earths. They've done their own drilling, and it's only on quite a small part of the tenement package that they've currently worked on. And that's, I think, one of the things that, like, I think that's maybe appeals to people in the Brazilian, like in Brazil, particularly for clay hosted rare earths, is that a lot of these things aren't hard to find. They're often associated with bauxite deposits, which, like there's not going to be any new bauxite deposits discovered in the world. They'll just be better versions of existing ones, because we know exactly where they are. They're between the two tropics, they're in tropical zones, they have a certain look, all of that stuff. So a lot of these Brazilian deposits were originally bauxite deposits, and now people have gone and analyzed them for rare earths and realized that there's rare earths there.
Could be the next up and coming district. I've heard some parts of Brazil like very pro mining, cheap labour, shitloads of power, fucking tick tick tick. Just got to know if there's water.
Yeah, and I think so. The Brazil, I think, space is also kicking up because they, like Europe and North American demand is kind of positioning Brazil as a supplier to them, so they can reduce their reliance on Chinese demand. So that's why I think now that Serra Verde is up and running, like there will probably be more impetus to create more rare earth kind of projects in Brazil. So I think Brazilian rare earth is really well placed for that. Meteoric obviously was one of the first ones out. And they're kind of chugging along with their project. They're obviously not at the scale that Serra Verde is at, so they're going to maybe have a longer development timeline. And then VMM, I think, is like maybe a step below that, where they're probably still coming up and kind of filling that space as well.
Isn't it interesting? But if you talk about Brazil and Thai and rare earths and lithium together, it'd be interesting to see what between Sigma lithium and potentially Latin as well, what actually happens there. Because as we know, Sigma's pretty much up for sale, and then you would assume Latin would tie in with that
at the right price.
At the right price.
Yeah.
So mate, Brazil could be the next Namibia.
Yeah. Do you know? I mean, you're up in the exploration world. You know the people. Do you know Joanna from Equivest?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to interview her one day. She's I know she's pretty interested in VMM, and I mean she was like pretty loud and early on WA1 as well. So and now doing BHP Explore. So I reckon she'd have some interesting exploration insights.
Must be rich.
Oh, this is a great.
That's what you comment to everyone. Must be rich.
must be rich if they got on that early.
We should show this this cross section of the caldera that you've got here. It's a great way for me to picture the bauxite sitting on top with the clay and the rare earths beneath it. That's a good one.
Yeah, so I think, so essentially, like bauxites and clay hosted rare earths will form in the same setting. Is that if they become really weathered, you probably get a bauxite. And that's kind of what I was talking about. Like, when you talk about rare earths, like, you have the source rock, like, the hard rock that has rare earths. And then if you talk about the monazite sands, that's basically that same rock where it's eroded, but not necessarily weathered. Eroded just meaning that you've just broken up the rock into smaller pieces, and that's gone there. And then the clay is where you've taken that rock and you've weathered it. So you've taken away everything else, and the rare earths aren't very chemically active, so they don't move as easily, and so they slowly build up, and then that's essentially what you kind of get.
So we do see a bit of rare earth exploration right up in far North Queensland, where all the bauxite mines kind of sit. I wonder if we'll see some of the explorers go up there and have a poke around.
Yeah, so a lot of that
Let's
will
get a shell.
We should.
Yeah. Fucking hell.
There you go. I mean, done.
Give you some seed.
Yeah, all right, done. Yeah, I'll go scope it out.
Oh, sweet,
I'll go figure out the chemistry.
You are the seed.
That's but yeah, and then the other one, like, you can flash this kind of graphic up as well, which is the mining processing kind of like how the market looks for rare earths.
Yeah.
And you can see like, the dominant position kind of China plays in that sense. So even in China, like rare earths is not a huge percentage of their domestic kind of metal market. Yeah. Like it's a small fraction of it.
Yeah.
So it's just, like on a global scale, like you could go find a rare earth, but what do you actually kind of gain out of it from a real economic kind of value? I'm not sure. It's just more strategic value, and whether you want rare earths as part of a domestic supply chain or not. Really, that's really kind of the question.
Beautiful, Ahmad. Rare earths very much remain in the too hard basket for me after this chat, just like they did after the DK chat.
Stick with the incumbents, he reckons.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a pretty good advice in that, the companies like Linus and even Aluka and things like that, like they, like their ability to operate on a scale is so different to someone else trying to come in and trying to work these things out that I think, their supply can well and truly meet any demand that we're going to have for a while, I think.
Well, it's probably fucking true with lithium as well. Like, if you're gonna put a bet on lithium, would you bet on a Liontown in development or an Andover not in development, or Pilbara Minerals or a
Pilbara P3000, mate.
P3000?
Just
Once
get
Rio gets in there,
the costs right down.
mate. Rio. Keep your eyes out, JD.
You called that
Mate,
one, mate.
they're doing Serbia now.
But do you think it's just Serbia?
We didn't even talk about the jadarite mineral.
That's right.
Yeah. Next time, mate. Next time.
Yeah. But now that Rio has got
hard.
the project back, they
Yeah.
can actually do something with it. So
Yeah, very excited to see what goes on there.
Yeah. Beautiful, Ahmed.
Cool.
Bloody love it, mate. Punters, if you're listening, keep feeding Ahmed and he will feed you with info. We'll get you in bloody a bit of a fortnight jobby, isn't it?
Yeah, I think
like
so.
it.
Yeah.
Mate,
Depending on how many comments we get.
Yes.
Couple of partners to thank, Matty.
Oh, fucking who we got, JD?
Wow.
Same as yesterday.
I don't know where to go with that one, mate.
I assume they're yesterday. Same 8.
Same
Same
8,
9.
Same 9, yeah.
Yeah.
VRIFY, GetWet Solutions, DSI Underground, Silverstone, CRE Insurance, WA Waterboards, Brooks Airways, K-Drill, and
How good Spark, eh?
Spark.
Spark's good.
Hooteroo.
Hooteroo.
The information contained in this episode of Money of Mine is of general nature only and does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. Before making any investment decision, you should consult with your financial advisor and consider how appropriate the advice is to your objectives, financial situation, and needs.